What's up, guys, and welcome to the first episode of the Sketchwave. I am one of your hosts. My name is Joel, and of course, I am joined by my co-host, as always, which will be the one and only James Julier. James, how you doing?
Very good, thanks. Very good. Yeah, pleased to be here. It's exciting, I think, that we're doing this.
It is exciting. I can feel my heart going a little bit. I'm excited for it. So, what is the show? That's probably one thing that's really important for us to discuss off the bat. Is what is the show? The show is something me and James have actually spoken about a few times, but we actually spoke about it almost a year ago now. Of some sort of casual conversational type show, essentially a podcast, but between the two of us, where we can talk about things that we don't get a chance to on our main channels. Most of the time with our content, we have to get someone from A to B, step one, all the way through to the very end, step by step. And there's no room for any sort of conversational content. And that's where me and James thought there might be a little bit of a gap, just to give you guys some extra sort of content, a little bit of a behind the scenes. I know there's probably hundreds of thousands of people that have never seen James' face before, but now get the opportunity to do so. So we are here, and we aim to do a weekly show. It's going to be a weekly show, initially starting off where we're going to be scheduling it on a Tuesday. So make sure you are subscribed to the channel as well. Make sure you turn on notifications so you can get notified about when we publish a new episode. As well as there's also going to be a link in the description down below to our socials. There you'll be able to find everywhere that we are, and obviously other ways that you can support the show by following us on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, as well, of course, as subscribing to the channel. James, did you want to go ahead and go over just a few of the things that we're planning on talking about on the show?
Sure. Loads of really interesting things that I think we can get into, from the recent Apple event and forthcoming Apple events to sort of AI news to Procreate updates, and just generally kind of like a look behind the curtain of the way that we actually format our tutorials, how we come up with ideas, and all the kind of inspirations behind that. I just think it's going to be a way that we can just have a conversation too. I noticed that, when I'm at home doing my tutorials, then that's like a community. Sometimes on the chats and the comments are really great within YouTube, but it'd be really nice to build a kind of community where we can have a kind of backwards and forwards conversation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I'm going to be doing, guys, is if you want to submit a question that you'd like us to cover in the show, there will actually be a link in the description down below where you can go ahead and fill out a quick Google form where you can submit a question to the show as well. And potentially we will cover some of them on the show. So if you have something that you'd like us to talk about, again, make sure to hit the link in the description down below. Now, James, you mentioned there about the Apple event. At the time of recording, it is exactly a week ago since that Apple event happened.
Yeah.
So we're recapping. However, there's some good news about it, but we're bringing it back up for a good reason, because James must have been inspired by the new updates. Do you want to go ahead and let everybody know what you've gone and gifted yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I've had my current iPad for about 3 years now, and honestly, from the Apple event, there were some really interesting updates to the iPad. There were some really interesting updates to the iPad, but I suppose in some ways they were mainly kind of technical things, the power of it and the improvements to the screen with it now being OLED. But then I'm also interested in the Apple Pencil Pro. Do intend to keep relatively up to date with the iPads. I don't want to be sort of too many iterations behind. I do use also a matte screen protector for my iPad, and it does dull the image. It makes it less reflective, but the blacks are less black, and therefore the idea of getting the latest iPad with the OLED brightness, I think, might really sort of just shine through the matte screen protector a little bit.
So I'm assuming you haven't then gone for the really expensive nano texture version, because I think that's a really interesting thing to talk about, in a sense that for us, a lot of us use paper like screen covers, or one from Pen Tips, or anyone like, those textured screen covers. When the second I saw it, I thought, wow, it'd be interesting to know if they have any good texture on it, like what it actually feels like to draw, or is it simply just for the matte effect? But two, if you do draw on it and it does have texture, the wonderful thing with like a paper like is once you see that start to grain up or scratch up, you just whip it off and put a new one on. I was immediately like panicking for people, thinking, don't buy this thinking that texture is going to be something that it will be like a paper like that's built in, because if it scratches up with a pencil, which you would imagine it won't do that, but over time and hard pressure and everything like that, how that'll work with the Apple Pencil, I have no idea. Now, I'm going to go back to my question. Did you buy the one with the nano texture, or did you go for
No,
the
and
glass?
absolutely not. I mean, you can only get that version if you buy the 1 terabyte or the 2 terabyte version anyway, and it's pretty expensive. I plumped for the 512 storage, and I think that that's enough. I don't really want to have to spend another several £100s just to actually get something. And like you say, we don't know how it's going to stand up over time anyway. If we're constantly drawing on that screen, it comes with its own special cleaning cloth, which tells you something that if it requires its own special cloth and they don't want using just any old thing to clean it, then it suggests that there might be a slight issue going forwards with that. I would be very nervous. I mean, I know with the, like say with the screen protectors, they don't last forever. I tend to leave them on longer than I should do, but they gain really significant marks after only about a month or so,
Yeah.
Paperlike especially, but the one I use that is ESR, it lasts a bit longer, but it's only a matter of time before you get those kind of scuffs and marks and whatever they're doing for that coating. I don't know. I don't like the idea of it being a long-term texture for drawing on. I'm not even sure that's what it's intended for. They haven't really, apart from the anti-glare thing, they've not said whether it is going to be suitable for regular use with the Apple Pencil. So who knows? It's a bit too much of a gamble, so that's definitely not what I decided to go for.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you say which size you went for? Did you go for a larger, smaller screen size?
Yeah, I mean, the tutorials that I've done so far have all been on the 12.9, so I think to go down in size now would be a little jarring compared to what people are used to. I know for yourself, you tend to do it in portrait orientation, a lot of your tutorials, so that it fills the frame differently than mine. But if I was to use the smaller 11-inch in the frame that I'm using, I don't know whether it would look a little bit different than what people are used to. And I just like the landscape working way and just a slightly larger format.
Yeah, it makes more sense for the YouTube videos to have it in landscape. The only reason I do it in portrait, sorry, is simply because of like reuse of the footage, so that you can reuse it for socials, and it works much nicer. It's like having one video that tries to fit all sort of use cases. There are occasions where I do think about switching it to landscape, and people ask me all the time. I go, "Why on earth are you doing it in portrait?" But one, I quite like how it looks on camera with. In terms of just positioning, and also the sketchboard as well in terms of my layout, because I continue and always will continue to use a sketchboard. I find them so much more comfortable in my like shoulder, my neck, and my back. So for me, I have to use it in there, and I find it more comfortable in the portrait orientation.
That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it might be interesting for people as well to know that like the differences in our iPads, because for me, I'm still using a 2018 11-inch iPad Pro. It was 256 gig at the time. It is obviously of storage. And for me, like it still runs buttery smooth. Like I was talking to a friend about it, of saying if you buy a iPad Pro, I genuinely believe if you buy an iPad Pro, almost mine, I wouldn't go as low as mine if I was to tell someone to buy a Pro like now, but if you were to get an M1 or M2 or now obviously M4, even going for an M1 or M2, I think so many general people in the Procreate space that just use it for a bit of YouTube or a little bit of Procreate, and as long as you get a good amount of storage, I think people will use them for ages. I have no problems with my iPad at all. Like, it runs butterly. I dread to think how many canvases are in Procreate. Like there's got to be nearly 700 canvases in there, like of just doodle stuff that I've done in the past, tutorials alone, Patreon, YouTube, everywhere. And I just think for me, I would if I was to get a new iPad and I basically hand this over to someone and say, do you want to draw? I wouldn't feel guilty handing it over to someone thinking that they're going to have a lesser experience. I think that there's so many of the older iPads that with the fluid motion screens, ProMotion, that's what it is. With the fast refresh rate, they're beautiful pieces of kit. And then obviously as you move up the spectrum and all the tiers, you get more and more quality of just, the absolute best screens you can get, like money can buy. You're going to then be moving to OLED, which is going to be really punchy colors, very bright as well. Are you not worried how that's going to come across on camera?
It's true. People already, find that there's a disparity between how my paintings on screen look compared to when they've downloaded the color palette and they apply it to their own scene, and they compare it's my camera that does that. Typically, it's because I'm pretty old school. I don't have a very complex setup. I do intend to buy, like say, this new iPad that's coming out, but I still use my phone as my camera. So I think that accounts for why the colours sometimes look a bit oversaturated with my iPhone. It may push it even further. I don't know. We'll have to see. It's possible that the OLED screen will just over bright and oversaturate everything. It remains to be seen, really. But yeah, I know exactly what you're saying though. With the older iPads, they still run Procreate perfectly. There's no issues. I think maybe was the one or two of the updates to Procreate that required a newer iPad. I forget which ones they would be now, but maybe the 3D rendering
as well.
Yeah, certainly the hover feature is a newer iPad thing, because I don't have that currently. Yeah, that's true. And there may well be things going forward as well. I mean, one of the reasons that I personally are going to have need for a new iPad is that I do edit on my iPad as well. And I just fill it up with videos that I'm editing and just trying to juggle everything. I'm deleting things as I go. I've currently got a 256 gigabyte M1 iPad Pro. But the only way that I can function is to delete things before I edit a new video. I have to delete the previous video pretty much, which is not ideal. So I'm going for the larger size for that reason, but also I quite like the idea, because sometimes I use LumaFusion, and sometimes the iPad gets quite warm, sometimes it gets quite laggy and it slows down, and I have to kind of reset the app in order to sort of kickstart it again a little bit. So I'm hoping that with that extra kind of power under the hood, that it should seem a little bit better. What do you edit on? Do you edit on the iPad, or is that all desktop?
So I used to edit on LumaFusion on the iPad. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. The only thing is I wanted to do like a tiny bit more, but not so much in my tutorials that people see in other content that I make and produce.
Right, yeah.
So for me, it was a switch to the MacBook. But also, I think, for yourself, you'll be able to make use now of using external hard drives, so that you could use an SSD and have all your content on an SSD. Because my Mac, for example, is just a 256 gig MacBook Air, but I always have a SSD plugged in, and that's where all the video footage goes. That's where it stays. And then when I'm done with it, I move it off onto a hard drive, which is like 8 terabytes or something like that, because a hard drive is typically cheaper than an SSD. So you can get a really large hard drive and just move everything across, just for archive's sake, in case you want to go back and grab some footage. But yeah, I'm constantly always running off of an SSD, which of course you'll be able to as well using the ports on the iPad, which will be blazing fast.
Definitely, yeah.
Just going back then to the event, if you're buying the new Pro, then that would mean that you have been forced into buying the new Apple Pencil Pro. Is that correct?
It's true. I mean, forced is a thing, but yeah, no, absolutely so. And in terms of the new functions on the Apple Pencil Pro, I don't know whether I'll ever be using them on the tutorials. I don't really want to create a tier of tutorials where only people with the latest technology can access them and do the tutorials. That doesn't seem very sensible. So I won't be using the barrel, the roll feature, and I won't be using the squeeze feature within the tutorials at all. That will only just confuse people and turn people off to the whole tutorial. So whether I use it within my own art flow and production, it remains to be seen. I do like the idea that they're pushing the technology forward. I don't know. I was kind of hoping for a kind of different shape to the Apple Pencil somehow, maybe finer nibs, maybe replaceable nibs with different textures. I mean, as much as the Apple Pencil is super accurate and it doesn't lag hardly at all, I don't know. I just think there's progress that could even be made on that even. No. If it could literally seem like there was no gap whatsoever between the end of the Apple Pencil. Because there is, and if you really pay attention to it, there's always been a bit of a lag. It's less so with the last few iterations of the iPad Pro. But I still think things they could do there, really. I mean, if you look at the Apple Pencil, if it was a real pencil, it's quite a blunt one, isn't it? It's not a sharp nib, which is fine for what we do. You're going to get is a disconnect there between the end of the Apple Pencil and the size of the brush that you're using. For example, if you use a really thick brush or a really thin brush, it doesn't matter what the width of the Apple Pencil is, I suppose, on the end of the nib. But still, it would be quite nice to feel that you were absolutely pinpoint accurate at times, or just a different texture at least. Because I think on different stylus for Samsung devices, I've not really tested this out, but I believe that they have different textured nibs, so it can give you a different feel while you're drawing. And there are certainly products that you can apply onto the Apple Pencil, change out the nib, and put different products on there. Not Apple products, but you can put other third-party nibs into the Apple Pencil. But I don't know. I think there's more that potentially with Apple put their minds to it, they could come up with something really cool, I think. The actual additional features for the Apple Pencil this time haven't overly excited me. It's more a case of future-proofing in a sense. I don't want to be too far behind just in case Procreate releases something overnight that is only going to be applicable to iPads in the future. And like I say, I do use an iPad for editing and other things as well, so I find that I just need the latest. I'm not quite the latest, it is 3 years old, my iPad, but I need to relatively keep up with things a little bit, just for the stuff that I do outside of YouTube as well, really.
Yeah, I think going back to like the Apple Pencil, it's very different I think for a general, so most of the people listening to this, using Procreate, who, just draw, whether you're following along with our tutorials, you can always make use of the additional new features that come along with Apple's new versions. We have a bit of a curse where there is no way for us to utilize these tools straight off the bat, because you will alienate a huge majority of your audience.
It's very true.
And the problem is, for me, and I think that's partly why I've not also upgraded myself, because at some point you're going to make the decision, I am going to use Barrel, but there will still be a percentage of your audience that is not using that. So of course they're going to have to utilize it in different ways. And I kind of don't like really having that sort of process where, yes, I'm doing it this way, but because you're doing it on a different machine, you're going to have to optimize it differently. For example, on my second channel, on the Joel Designs channel, that focuses a lot of creating content that's based for on multiple apps across multiple platforms, so Android, iOS, even Windows. And I am constantly saying in my content, if you don't have pressure sensitivity, do this. And I know we could do that with our Procreate tutorials, but majority of people who are doing Procreate tutorials have invested in an Apple Pencil. So I'm happy to. It's almost, again, it's how much of your audience is utilizing those features in order for you to then say, well, we'll always use pressure sensitivity and I'll never speak about it. So the pressure, you mentioned about like the squeeze feature in the Barrel looks amazing. But again, I'm like, at what point would I be able to say, let's use Barrel in a tutorial? Obviously you're going to be very lucky that you're going to be able to create some content anyway at the very beginning to even just show how good it is and how it works, and all of those features which everybody's going to love. But yeah, it's a bit of a curse at times. But I think the pencil, going back to it, when I saw the Haptic Engine on the very tip of it, I heard this on the Vergecast podcast, and they were talking about there was a Windows Surface pen that had a Haptic Engine in it of their build, and it works in a way where the engine could actually replicate the paper feel through vibration. So no paper screen cover needed, and just like that extra emphasis of that you're drawing and sketching or whatever it may be. And when I saw that it was there, I thought immediately they're going to do it. And then as it wrapped, I thought, they're future-proofing themselves. I can almost see that in a year's time, there's an update. Now, Apple are never going to always give us everything we want straight away. It's always going to be spaced out across a bit of time and drip feed here and there. And this is where the Android and iOS argument always comes in of, well, we've had this on Android for ages. And it's, you have, but then Apple slowly give it to you because they slow down the pipeline to pick what they need. And I definitely think there could be an update to that Haptic Engine to do some nice fancy features, probably in association with apps like Procreate, maybe
Yeah.
Fresco or something like that, where they can partner with them to pull through those textures. Because Procreate doesn't have what a lot of canvases have of, you can have your canvas actually have a texture as the base layer, so it mimics as if you're drawing on a certain canvas. And if it ever implemented that, that's when that feature could just come alive. But yeah, I think the Apple Pencil looks very, very cool. Very cool. And I'm glad they kept it the same price.
Yeah, I think they realise they have to, because they're already alienating people by making them have to update. If they already owned one on a previous iteration, like I do, I'm going to have to buy a brand new one. Whereas, you know, they realise they're forcing people to have to do that. Admittedly, it's because they've shifted the camera, therefore the magnet setup is slightly different. But still, it doesn't take the sting out of it much. When you're having to fork out another £129, $129 is a lot of money extra just for the Apple Pencil. But I do, yeah, you're right about the Haptic Engine. That is something that could be quite exciting, I think, if they manage to activate that and implement that within apps like Procreate, just to give you that. And that would get around the need for a changeable nib with a different texture. If they could give that simulation of a texture somehow, that could be really cool. That's definitely something. And that would definitely be a reason to have that, I think. Probably more than, for me, that would be more of a benefit than the barrel roll or the squeeze.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Okay, I've got a question for you then. What is the largest iPad that you'd be happy with? Is the 13-inch the largest?
I need to get a tape measure out and go.
Yeah. I've said this on so many live streams and so many videos. If they ever brought out a 15 or 16-inch iPad, totally a huge canvas, I wouldn't even think about it. And I know the price would be close. You'd be getting close to the $2,000 mark, or $2,000 for everybody else. It's a dream, but I just don't. I tell a lie. Actually, I do think they will do it. Because of their focus around creators, I think they are going to have to start doubling down on, this is made for a creator. And some creators in larger spaces, even if you had a 16-inch iPad and you were using it for a lot of their music software, anything like that, you've got more space for more drums, you've got more layer for yourself. A 16-inch for LumaFusion, more tracks, visible on screen at all times, more width of tracks, and so on. I think 16-inch. A lot of people are happy with, what is it, 15 or 16-inch on the MacBook Pros?
I'm unsure. I was going to ask you that question. Yeah, I mean, if it makes it similar feel to the large MacBook, then it makes sense, doesn't it? For many people.
100%. And so many creators will be like, if I'm already happy to carry that laptop around with me, I'm happy to carry around a 16-inch iPad if it means I can take it with me wherever I need to go. But for me, that massive easel is just something that I just think about, like that massive canvas.
Would you use it for your tutorials then, though?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the camera would have to be close to the ceiling to obviously fit it all in. Especially at that point, I would probably have to switch to landscape, because at that point you're just trying to fit it all in. But I would definitely use it in. I mean, for Procreate, all it would do is just stretch the wider across the top. It wouldn't necessarily make too much adjustment necessary to.
It'd be useful for when you're having like extra little boxes open, like the reference thing. Don't do that so much in the tutorials, but when you're doing your own personal work, being able to have the little reference box open and still having a huge chunk of canvas available would be really good. You're going to have so many things going on at the same time. And also then when you do like split view, it would make so much more sense to have a screen just that extra bit bigger. But yeah, just the sheer volume, the size of it would be pretty awesome.
Yeah, I would keep my 11-inch iPad for personal. I can't imagine me, putting on my bedside table a 16-inch iPad to go to sleep. I think Mrs. Crate would be fuming with the glare of a massive OLED screen just lighting up the room like a cinema. I love my 11-inch iPad. I think it's a great size for people that are just doing a lot of everything. If you just sat on the sofa, it's not something you feel like is cumbersome to try and work a position out to try and make it comfortable to draw on. I think it's a nice little size, but I do. A friend of mine's got the larger one, which you've obviously bought and already got, and I look at it and think, wow, that is big.
You get used to the format though, don't you? I mean, I remember when I was first doing art, it wasn't the tutorials, because I've only really started doing the tutorials when the iPad Pro first came out. So before that, I was using, oh blimey, I don't remember what format of iPad it was now anymore, but it was maybe a 9.7-inch screen. It wasn't big. But I was using it, I was producing artwork on it. I didn't have a problem with it at the time. But it's amazing how you adjust to the format that you have, isn't it? You know,
Yeah,
like the 12.9 doesn't seem like a large screen anymore. So I think I would get used to a 15-inch screen. I think it would be pretty cool.
When does that cycle end? You're going to be drawing on a 32-inch in 10 years from now.
Well, it's got to be
10,
portable, isn't it? Yeah, it's got to be portable. You know.
Yeah.
It depends, though. I mean, if it was a permanent setup like desktop situation. I remember watching an episode of a Black Mirror where, it was not a real piece of tech, but there was a drawing board and it was full on desk size, it was huge. But even like a canvas, imagine an electronic canvas you could draw on as it was filled the whole wall or something. I'd be totally about that if it existed.
I will try and find this video for our viewers. There is a video by a creator. It was a Samsung sort of collaboration, and they had sent him out a screen that must have been about, I think it was about sort of 65-inch to 70. It's basically a TV screen, but it was a touch screen, and he could open Windows apps on it, and he was painting with these brushes, but the brushes were fine tipped like a normal paintbrush. The screen could recognize it as a touch, so he was painting with a paintbrush. Admittedly, it was in like MS Paint or something like that. It was not as good as Procreate, and he was having a tough time. But he had this massive screen, and I was like, that is unreal. Like, that is such a cool experience. No one's ever going to have it. It's never going to be a consumer product. It's something to slide slides on a screenshot, a slideshow, sorry, in like a meeting or something like that. But yeah, it was amazing. Just going back to the event, because I think there's one thing to touch on, which is my kind of highlight if I was to pass this information on to other people, out of my general overview. I said at the time when it came out, for me, the 13-inch Air would be one of the directions I would make for like anyone asking. I think the price point, I think it was $799 for the 13-inch. You're getting that big canvas size. I believe it is exactly the same. Apple will always move stuff down the pipeline and just repackage it. The Air is now the iPad Pro of
course,
my version. If it was the singular camera on the back, the aluminium, which I know aluminum is probably going to come up in the comments or something like that. But it's just been passed down. But to have that 13-inch iPad Air, I think that's a really good purchase. In fact, somebody's actually already messaged me on Patreon to say that theirs comes tomorrow and they can't wait for it. The M2 and an M2 chip in it as well is plenty of power for most people.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm using an iPad Pro, but it's an M1, so I can't see any reason why the majority of people wouldn't prefer the larger screen iPad Air. I mean, apart from the OLED screen, there's not only, I guess, the M4 chip. Currently, as they presented it, there's not an awful lot of advantage to buying the iPad Pro, the newest version, unless there's a load of extra things that is going to come out in time using AI, because apparently there's a whole component of the M4 chip that is there to support AI apps and development. That will be interesting. It may be that give it another 12 months or 2 years, then suddenly that iPad will make a lot more sense then. So we'll have to see, I guess. But right now,
I mean, I was listening again to the Vergecast, and they had a big segment, and I think this is something that might be quite interesting for us to talk about. Is it the start of the iPad, a new wave of the iPad, or is it the end of the iPad? Has it come to the end? Because in terms of the physical limitation, that iPad is as complete as you can get, unless every year we shave a millimeter off before it's literally a roll up, or even a roll up iPad that can extend. At the minute, it's almost the final version of what that iPad could look like. That screen is unbelievable. It's so thin, the battery life. And what they were saying is, because Apple moved right at the very end of the event to and join us in a month's time. It's just less than a month now for their event. It felt, and this is their kind of, I'm sort of paraphrasing a little bit, that it felt as if there's something coming to the iPad, but we can't talk about it yet because it needs to integrate with WWDC that comes out in June. And we can't tell you right now because it actually affects the whole ecosystem, you know, on your phone, your iPad, and everything else. And whether or not the M4 version is going to be an absolute AI monster of just super capabilities. I mean, one of the guests on there was saying, imagine if they like sort of worked out a way to be like, you can actually run Mac on your iPad if you want, you know, if you could use it as a Mac and Bluetooth keyboard all you want, but that's a whole nother topic. But if it could, I do think that there's potentially something on the horizon in WWDC for that iPad's power to be unlocked, because you're going to love it for LumaFusion and rendering, etc. Like that. And there are a few apps that do take advantage of it, but that amount of power, there has to be a reason for that much horsepower.
It seems, disproportionate to the usage, doesn't it? You know, there just aren't the apps there to require that much power, and it doesn't make a lot of sense currently. So you can only think that they know what's coming down through the pipeline. There's going to be a requirement for that. Having said that, I'm at pains to think of how many apps that have required the updates to the current chips. I mean, I think that they jumped straight from an M1 to, it's gone from M2, I believe, isn't it, in the iPad Pro?
M2 to M4,
to M4. I mean, I don't know what advantage has really been taken of the M2 so far, never mind M4. So, I don't know. I think sometimes they just get a little bit obsessed on creating very, very, very powerful iPads, but then unsure what to do with all that power. It looks great on paper, and it makes people buy them. And certainly, yes, in theory, it does future-proof them. It's trying to find ways of actually using that, isn't it? Unless they really give you a desktop experience, there's not really apps out there that require that. I mean, I certainly don't use apps that require that, apart from the editing software, LumaFusion, which hopefully will become a little bit faster, a little bit smoother. But even then, it's doing fine on an M1 chip for the most part. I don't know whether it really needs an M4 rather, so I'm getting confused. But yeah, M4 seems a little bit overcharged for what people use an iPad for, but who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. And was there anything else from the event that you saw that took your fancy or just intrigued you a little bit? Because I've got one to wrap it up with.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Twitter, after the event, after the Procreate section, I think it was after the Procreate or after the full event, there was a slide. And again, I'll try and put it on screen in the edit. There was a tweet. I haven't got my phone. There was a tweet. Sorry, a screen showed on screen. And I'm not going to be able to quote it correctly, but it referenced that Procreate is a subscription-based application and something else underneath. And Twitter went nuts. They were like, oh, there we go. It's happened. They dropped it in subtly at the end. And Procreate's actual Twitter account, rather than just reply to one, they're replying to every single person going, this was a mistake. It will stay as a one-off fee. All of our apps are one-off fees. Everybody stay calm. Twitter was going crazy. When I saw it initially, I was like, oh no, here we go. But to drop that in subtly at the end of an Apple event and not even like a Procreate event to even explain why. Okay, so try and sort of throw that back at you as a question. Do you think it would ever move to a subscription?
I hope not, is my best thought on that. I mean, I don't think so. I think that the majority of people that use it, have bought it years ago. And as much as, I guess it's a difficult one to say, isn't it, really? I know that's the route that other Adobe-like companies have taken, but I don't use them for that reason. So I personally would find it a big blow. I think I would struggle with that, because what it would do to our channels is then if the user base is just going to halve, vanish almost overnight if people are then having to pay for it in order to join in. So for the casual kind of person who just likes to dabble in creative things a little bit. I mean, I don't know what it's currently priced at. Is it $10, £10, £15? I don't really know. I mean, it's so cheap.
It's $12 now, isn't it?
Right, okay. But even then, it's a bargain. It really is. I mean, I paid, I don't even know when it was now. It must have been back in 2013, 13, 14. It must be 10 years now. I paid my initial fee for it, which I think was like $6.99. And I've never paid anything since, so it is crazy good value. And I think whatever point you jump in at, you've got a decade's worth of use, hopefully, and hopefully they'll stick to that. I mean, they've become huge on the back of the fact that they're such good value. I think they would really shoot themselves in the foot to change the form, and they might make some money quick. It might be a good cash grab, but ultimately, I think it would do great harm, I think, to them. So hopefully not.
It's like the app models back in the day, because the app models for most apps, it was a one-off fee. You'll get your money as a developer straight away, and that's it. But then when you're trying to innovate an app 5-10 years down the line, you don't have the budget is only ever necessarily going to sort of dwindle. You without that constant money in every single month, you're constantly thinking, how much can I actually invest in this in terms of time and labor and developers and stuff like that? I mean, luckily, I think I agree with you. I think the user base would just plummet. Right? The second that went out, I think it would be devastating. The reason Procreate is not only, I don't want to put this solely on that, but Procreate is so good because there is so much around it. Like it's a great app. It's minimalistic. It keeps most people sort of nobody downloads it, and it's like I will finish one of those sentences. When you go to like open up Photoshop as a newbie, you will open that and go, where do I start? Where is it? There's so many things, but Procreate has managed to keep it somewhat simple, and they've kept it slow in terms of adding too many features.
I think we've been in the ecosystem of the user face of Procreate for such a long time. We might underestimate how intimidating it might be now at this point.
That's very true.
But
that's very true.
But they do still have a very good user interface, I think.
And the reason I also think it's done so well, because an app does well when there's something bigger than it. There's educational content, especially in like the drawing space and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Again, I can take that knowledge from my second channel and understand how that actually does work. Like Procreate, I actually get a bit overwhelmed if you ever go to, I ask, are you after the show, go to YouTube and type in Procreate tutorial and go to new. And don't go by whatever pops up straight away. Go by new and just see how many tutorials. There are people you've never heard of, but there's content out all the time. And that's one of the best things about it. You can find a niche that you love and you can heavily dive into it. And there's other tutors that will provide you with other, the same niche, but other, content. And
the danger is for Procreate. The danger is for Procreate, if they change to a subscription model, then you'll get another company come along who is more of a startup company who will replicate what they've done but offer it for $10, £10, and recreate what Procreate did, and Procreate will be pushed out of favour. So there is a real risk if they look to doing a subscription.
And there's a risk then to the creators as well, because how many people would see a dip in numbers and gone, this is my livelihood. I have to jump ship. I have to find something that I can appeal to that big audience that we've now got. But anyway, we don't want to end it on a doomsday note, but I think we will wrap it up there. Guys, thank you so much for taking the time to watch the very first episode of The Sketch Wave. Again, this is going to be released every single week. There should be a couple for you to watch straight away. But if you are here day one, type day one in the comments down below so we can see who's been here at the very start. We appreciate you watching. And again, make sure to subscribe to the channel. And we'll be back again with another episode next time. Thanks for watching.
See you soon.